For the very first time ever, across the history of contemporary warfare, the United States took a massive geopolitical gamble. It gave its proxy, the armed forces of Ukraine, explicit permission to use supersonic, tactical, long-range ballistic missiles to target and destroy key Russian military assets stationed anywhere inside of the belligerent nation's borders. News of the Biden administration's hushed move quickly took the media's spotlight, as just a few short hours after 6 ballistic missiles allegedly destroyed a Russian ammunition depot in Karachev, a small town located in western Russia's Bryansk Oblast, some 71.3 miles east of the Ukrainian border, Putin took a pivotal, high-stakes step, one which has created a tinderbox that could ignite the Russo-Ukrainian War into a veritable nuclear exchange. The supersonic missiles fired into Russia at 3:25 a.m. that mid-November morning weren't just any kind of supersonic missile. Specifically, they were American-made missiles. Long-range, MGM-140 ATACMS. These missiles operate by flying high into the atmosphere, thereby minimizing the likelihood of air defense interception right before slamming into their target up to 190 miles away. In that 190-mile range is a Goldilocks zone. It's not far enough to reach Moscow, nor short enough that it only engages targets within Ukraine, thereby making it a perfect tool to strike the buildup of high-value frontline infrastructure, ammunition depots, supply lines, and military bases, to name a few. While the ATACMS short-range counterpart has been in use since October of 2023, allowing its military to defend and retake sovereign territory, the long-range iteration had been strictly forbidden by American leadership. If Biden gave Zelensky long-range missiles too soon, say 1 year into the conflict, he ran the risk of squashing any possibility of negotiations with Moscow. With those likely off the table and only 2 months left in Biden's presidency, it became now or never. To understand the rationale behind America's decision, we have to wind the clock back to the previous day, Monday, November 18th. Across the planet from Karachev, in the Pentagon's press briefing room, Sabrina Singh, the deputy Pentagon press secretary, was scheduled to hold an off-camera, on-the-record briefing. Within moments of the meeting's start, a reporter called out, "Can you confirm that the Pentagon, like that Biden let Secretary of Defense Austin know this is green-lighted now?" This being in reference to the use of ATACMS, as Biden gave approval for long-range use while on a trip to Brazil's Amazon rainforest the day prior, Sunday, November 17th. Singh sidestepped. "I cannot confirm the reports, and I cannot go into more details about the reporting." She goes on to explain that what's adding fuel to the fire is the fact that DPRK soldiers are now entering a fight, and now you have, two nations. And we're talking about North Korean soldiers being used to take sovereign territory, Ukraine's sovereign territory. Before the teams of reporters could coax more information, she redirected again. Any type of nuclear saber-rattling is incredibly dangerous. It's reckless. Putin warned NATO of his plan back in September, but following Ukraine's strikes that Tuesday, he used those attacks as fuel to affirm he wasn't bluffing. He ratified a new, defensive stance against Western involvement in the conflict, a lowered nuclear response threshold. The updated nuclear doctrine explicitly stipulates that any form of conventional missile attacks targeting assets within Russia or Belarus is now a bright red line that isn't to be crossed. If conventional long-range missiles from a nuclear nation, like that of France and the United Kingdom with their respective Scalp and Storm Shadow cruise missiles, or the United States with its ATACMS, were received and then used by Ukraine or any other non-nuclear nation against targets on Russian or Belarusian soil, it would redefine the conflict in the eyes of Lukashenko and Putin. The war would no longer be Russia versus Ukraine, as Ukraine would no longer be considered NATO's proxy. Instead, the nuclear power supplying Ukraine with said long-range missiles would become Russia's formal aggressor. Dmitry Medvedev, Russia's third president, went as far as tweeting, "Russia's new nuclear doctrine means NATO missiles fired against our country could be deemed an attack by the bloc on Russia. Russia could retaliate with WMD against Kiev and key NATO facilities, wherever they're located. That means World War III." With the veil now lifted, their use not only marks the first time American-made ballistic missiles have crossed into Russia during this conflict, but at any point in history. In fact, the only other time that anything from the American military has been used inside of Russia against Russia was 104 years ago, at the tail end of World War I, during the Russian Civil War. And it would take another 24 years after World War I for Nazi Germany's Wehrmacht to fire the first long-range ballistic missile, the V-2 rocket. So what's happening between Russia, North Korea, Ukraine, and its NATO allies is truly an anomaly. The largest militaries on the planet going head-to-head like this just doesn't happen anymore. However, despite all of Putin's threats, the doctrine is very much do as I say, not as I do, as Russia has massively contradicted their exact requirement of the West. Just 9 months into the conflict, in November of 2022, they began their use of North Korean munitions. Not to mention, since late last year, they've also taken full advantage of their supply of North Korean-made ballistic missiles. Both sides, Russian and Ukrainian, have received support from abroad. Nonetheless, despite the incongruities in the nuclear doctrine, it isn't being taken lightly. Putin has clearly signaled to the world that he's willing to trigger Article 5 of NATO. And with so much on the line, America's long-range MGM-140s somehow made it to Ukraine, seemingly undetected. Though the Biden administration's delivery tactics were discreet, they were rather simple. Any sitting president has the authority to provide military assistance during crises, thanks to Section 506A1 of the Foreign Assistance Act. This privilege is better known as the Presidential Drawdown Authority. The first of these drawdown packages was authorized 2 months prior to the invasion, on December 23, 2021. It totaled some $200 million in supplies and was sent to prepare for a likely invasion, as Russia had cut diplomatic ties with NATO 2 months preceding the first PDA package. Over the following 2 years of conflict, alongside Zelensky's tireless lobbying efforts for long-range missiles and 54 PDA packages totaling some $25.875 billion in aid, America still hadn't sent Ukraine long-range ATACMS, only the aforementioned short-range variants. But then, just 2 months after Russia's defense minister visited Pyongyang, and 1 month after Kim Jong-un met Putin in Russia, came that long-awaited day, March 12, 2024. The Pentagon's press secretary, Air Force Major General Pat Ryder, addressed a room full of reporters with this tailored statement.
Today, the Department of Defense announced additional security assistance via the Presidential Drawdown Authority. This package is the 55th tranche of assistance and is valued at up to $300 million. The capabilities in this announcement include Stinger anti-aircraft missiles, additional ammunition for HIMARS.
The list continues for some time, but we'll stop it there. That subtle choice of phrase, additional ammunition, is where the full truth resides. HIMARS can only fire one of 3 munition types: GMLRs, precision strike missiles, or ATACMS. Without explicitly saying the United States sent ATACMS to Ukraine, Major General Pat Ryder was, in effect, saying the DoD sent Ukraine ATACMS. While technically not a lie, the Biden administration and Pentagon certainly are guilty of omission, but they did so in the heart of security. If word got out, an immediate aggressive response was expected, though they didn't hide the truth for long. By April 17th of 2024, the newly deployed long-range missiles had been used against an airfield in Crimea and against Russian forces in southeastern Ukraine that same night. 7 months later, and Western approval given, Ukraine didn't waste any time. Long-range ATACMS were launched into Russia November 19th, Storm Shadows on Wednesday the 20th, and neither have stopped since, but it hasn't come without cost. On the 21st, Russia responded to the perceived overstep by firing an experimental hypersonic missile at Dnipro. It was a variant of the RS-26 Rubez, called the Oreshnik. The nuclear-capable intermediate-range ballistic missile carried a 6-warhead payload composed of submunitions, aka cluster bombs. This volley didn't carry explosives, so it didn't detonate, and it caused limited damage, but it did send the world a terrifying message. Russia is ready. Still, even if Ukraine were to track the next Oreshnik launched, which Russia assured would continue, the missile would be incredibly difficult to intercept. Despite launching some 620 miles away from Dnipro in Astrakhan, it flies at an astounding speed in excess of Mach 10, which allowed it to make contact with Dnipro in 15 minutes. Then, 5 days following the live battle test of their new hypersonic ballistic missile, and exactly 1 week after the launch of the first ATACMS, Putin hit 17 different regions of Ukraine with a reported 188 drones, the single largest drone strike in the conflict's history. Thankfully though, despite Ukraine and its NATO allies disregarding Russia's nuclear doctrine and hitting targets inside of Russia many times over, Putin hasn't retaliated with a nuke or attacked a NATO member nation. Hopefully, this will never happen. Regional tensions are now at a point where the diplomatic cords keeping the war contained within Ukraine might actually begin snapping. This time, it is different. Putin wants what once was. He wants to reunite the bygone Soviet bloc, regardless of the human cost. What comes of this upped ante is difficult to know, but 2 things are certain. Putin has backed himself into a corner of his own doing, and NATO isn't letting up any of the tension. They know the world can't have a sitting president issuing baseless threats of nuclear attack, nor can they have one everyone willing to ink laws, lowering the threshold for its possibility. The world doesn't need war. The world needs de-escalation. But Putin has bolstered his nuclear trigger finger, enabling him to recklessly toe a line that hasn't been crossed in nearly 80 years. All we can do is wait and hope that there isn't a catalyst that causes an irreversible step.